Great. Well, thank you, Jesse, for doing that. And welcome everyone from wherever you are around the world. We had people register for the webinar from many, many different countries. So no matter what time zone you're in, I hope you're doing well. And welcome to the Communities Medicine webinar. It's about the ITRC's High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience initiative to help communities all over the world organize resilience coordinating networks for the climate emergency. So our key message, in case you just want to hear the key points, is that the global climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis requires transformational solutions, not just tiny marginal changes here and there. And the term I'm using is climate ecosystem biodiversity, or CEB crisis, for a reason. What we're experiencing is not just an atmospheric climate problem. It is large-scale degradation of ecological systems and the loss and extinction of biodiversity that are feeding on each other with the climate emergency. That's really what we're facing, and we need to address this issue. And so we need to make all sorts of transformational changes to address this, and one of those transformations is to proactively engage communities globally in creating the social infrastructure in their community needed to build what we call population level mental wellness and transformational resilience. And I'll explain that through the webinar. But if we do this, we can prevent and heal the rising mental health and psychosocial issues we're seeing all over the world, as residents also create, engage, and actually create healthy, safe, fair, regenerative, zero emission, climate emission, local conditions. That's the key message. If we get our communities together and create this social infrastructure in the communities, we can actually create some of the transformations that are needed to address these issues. So just a little background on the organization I coordinate, the International Transformational Resilience Coalition, ITRC for short. We like those short, snappy names that just roll off your tongue. We were founded back in 2013, 11 years ago, after Superstorm Sandy hit the East Coast of the US, and we saw mental health and psychosocial problems really skyrocket there. They're still dealing with some of them. After that, we started to run conferences and workshops and other programs to help raise awareness that we need to address the mental health issues of the climate emergency. And then about, I guess now 6 years ago, a number of our members came to us and said, we got to come up with a different approach because we cannot keep up with the mental health issues, the psychological, social, and emotional behavioral issues we're seeing resulting from relentless disasters, et cetera. So we kicked off what we thought was going to be a 6-month research project. Turned out to end up being about a 2.5-year research project. And it was international. We talked to people all over the world and looked at research done in many, many different countries and asked the question, does anybody have a solution to prevent and heal, or a method to prevent and heal widespread mental health and psychosocial problems generated by relentless adversities? And it turns out there is an approach. And in higher income Western nations, it's called a public health approach. And it needs to be applied in communities to build population level transformational resilience. So just to go into more details of the research and the findings we had, we concluded that the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is an unprecedented public health emergency that will produce radically more, radically different, and radically expansive types of mental health and psychosocial problems. And the existing pressures, the crisis, the issues most people in the human services field, mental health, human services field, we can only see today's trauma for the most part. We're just sort of dealing with what's happening now. And many of us fail to understand and prepare for the traumas speeding our way due to the climate ecosystem biodiversity catastrophe. Yet the scale and scope of the toxic stresses and traumas racing toward us will be profoundly more expansive and harmful compared to those that existed for most of human history. And just as importantly, the causes go far beyond extreme weather events. It is cascading disruptions to the ecological, social, and economic systems people rely on for food, water, shelter, jobs, incomes, health, safety, and other basic needs that are sometimes activated by and sometimes activate those extreme weather events, the disasters that we see them. And most of our theories and training have not prepared us, the people in the mental health, human services field, to address the multiple intersecting toxic stresses and traumas that almost everyone is going to begin to experience almost daily. We therefore need to be super careful not to assume that our thinking and methods that worked in the past will work in the future as the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis accelerates. And the multiple drivers of this issue, it's climate, it's ecological, it's biodiversity, it's many other things, means that healing is often going to be immune to individual approaches. So we concluded we need to make an equally radical shift in our thinking and methods from individual treatments to population level prevention and healing by building transformational resilience. And this relies on and depends on an emphasis on local and indigenous approaches. And we're going to talk about all this. If we don't address this issue directly and get out front of it by proactively building transformational resilience, the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is going to create a global epidemic of disease, of distresses and traumas. Most of us understand what a psychological, emotional, and spiritual distress is. It's worrying about the past, worrying about the future. It's what eco-anxiety is about. It's just really being concerned and distressed about what's happening in the world. But individual traumas go beyond that. This is when the way people view the world and see themselves, the core assumptions, the beliefs they hold about the world and themselves are shattered because of relentless high stresses or an acute, blunt event. And we're seeing that all over also already because of the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. And these traumas are what lead to the traditional mental health issues that we think about: anxiety, depression, PTSD, complicated grief, and more. But we're actually seeing problems that go far beyond the individual level. We're seeing community trauma. Excuse me. And this means when an entire community, geographic area, is traumatized by, for example, a wildfire that burns down the entire community, like happened in Lahaina, Hawaii, a number of months back, and that happened near me where I live in Oregon in the US, where the town of Blue River entirely burned down and traumatized many, many people. So it goes beyond just individual problems. Everyone is affected. And we're also seeing societal traumas generated by the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. This goes beyond an individual level, beyond a specific community level, to affect entire societies and nations. The COVID-19 pandemic is a classic societal trauma, and left unaddressed, the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is going to end up to be the greatest societal trauma modern society has ever experienced. And these kinds of traumas create these epidemics. And it's because unreleased trauma becomes buried in the nervous system and can cause constant flight or flight self-protective survival reactions. These are built-in reactions to try to protect ourselves. We try to fight back or we flee the scene. And it can lead people to deny what's happening, to dissociate from things, to just disconnect from reality, to blame others, attack others, or self-sabotage. We try to self-medicate ourselves with drugs, alcohol, or other substances that cause problems for ourselves and cause problems for our families and others. Or we even reenact the problem. We keep trying to reenact the issue, repeat the same kind of behaviors that caused the problem in the first place as we try to work it out in our mind. And as seen time and again throughout history, these kinds of widespread reactions can unravel families, groups, communities, and entire societies. So this is just not about dealing with mental health issues. Oh, this person's got a problem with anxiety or depression. These issues really affect entire families, groups, communities, and societies. And just as importantly today, these flight or flight protective reactions, these self-protection protective reactions that result from continued activation of the emotional brain, the limbic system, are also blocking climate solutions because people retreat into this self-protective survival mode and they don't want to deal with changes. Don't tell me I have to get a different kind of vehicle, shift to electric, or the gas prices are going to go up because we have to phase it out, or any other kinds of changes. And this is happening just when we need new thinking, adaptation, and innovation. It's really urgently needed, but we're seeing more and more people retreat into this self-protective survival mode. And another important point to add here is that there is no mental health without physical health. This is a comment or an adaptation of a comment by Dr. Brock Chisholm, who was the first director of the World Health Organization many years ago. And what it means is there's tremendous comorbidity between mental health and physical health problems. Mental health problems often cause a number of physical health problems, or can cause, and physical health problems can actually lead to mental health issues. Yet few people in our field in mental health, human services, community engagement, or even the environmental field really grasp this. We don't understand the connection. And so consequently, mental health and physical health are typically very siloed, they're separated, and mental health gets just a fraction of the resources, funding, et cetera, that physical health initiatives do. But left unaddressed, unless we understand this, the pervasive distresses and traumas generated by the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis are going to greatly accelerate physical health problems as well as healthcare costs. And we won't understand that unless we understand comorbidity. So we really need to understand that mental health services cannot address these challenges. They're going to remain very important where they exist, when they exist, and for whom they exist. But in many communities in the Western nations, and certainly in other countries, in middle and lower income nations, there are few or no mental health providers. And for many reasons, the research pretty clearly shows that about 50% of the people will not engage in mental health services. They're afraid of being stigmatized by others if they do so. There's concern about conflicts with religious or spiritual beliefs and many other reasons. And mental health services, including disaster mental health, are reactive. They're vital, but they are reactive. They respond to and treat crisis and illness. They do not proactively prevent problems by building resilience in the entire population or activate transformational changes. So our mental health services are going to remain important. Disaster mental health remain important, but that's not the solution to these issues. They're just the one very important piece of the puzzle. So it's very important to understand there that there is no such thing as community resilience without social, psychological, and emotional resilience. Slashing greenhouse gas emissions, regenerating ecological systems and biodiversity, strengthening external physical resilience, those are all essential activities that humanity must get involved with now. But most of this work is done by NGOs, nonprofits, or private sector companies or public entities, and they don't involve local residents. They might ask their opinion, get their feedback on a plan, but they go do the work themselves. It's not a community-based initiative. And the work of these organizations is siloed from activities that build human social, psychological, and emotional resilience. We're focused on the external factors that's somehow completely separated from the emotional and psychological side. I see that. We've run lots of workshops for climate activists, for climate science organizations, where the people are just very stressed and depressed and feel hopeless, but they don't know how to deal with that, so they actually turn on each other. and it can cause serious problems. And because of these issues, because all this siloing, et cetera, many of the external physical resilience projects are going to have limited effect unless an equal or greater emphasis is placed on strengthening human resilience, that it's integrated with that. And this is even more challenging because in most nations around the world, mental health issues have been privatized. The dominant paradigm of the medical model of health is that the individual alone is responsible for their psychological, emotional, and behavioral struggles. And the correct approach is therefore to diagnose and treat individuals, mostly one at a time, only after they experience symptoms, and today it's often with medication. But if this makes sense, how is it possible that mental health and psychosocial issues have continually grown to the levels that in many places around the world, they're now at epidemic levels? Do we have more genetic problems going on? Is alcohol and drugs simply more easily available? I don't think so. The current individualized paradigm, however, and the systems that support it frame and limit what we see and do to the existing perspective. Yet what is really happening is that most climate traumas and most other traumas today result from interacting individual, family, social, economic, built, and ecological factors. This is called the social ecological model. You can get information on it all over the web and lots of books on it. Down at the bottom, you see, yes, it's true, the individual genetics play a role in that person's mental health and well-being and resilience, their biology, but their knowledge, skills, their childhood experiences, but that's heavily influenced by the interpersonal relationships they have, connections with family, friends, the social networks they're involved with, and the social norms and values of those networks. Both of those factors are very influenced by the community factors that they exist in, the conditions of their neighborhoods, their workplace, schools, voluntary and civic groups, religious and spiritual organizations. All of that is influenced, all of these nested factors are influenced by structural factors, policies, institutions, power relationship, who's got it, who does not in your culture, in your community, in your society, and the type of level and services that exist. And all of that, all of these nested factors are greatly influenced by environmental factors, the conditions of food, water, and open space, the physical build, economic, and ecological conditions people live within. So the cultures in desert areas are different than cultures in rainforest-based areas. People think in different ways. So there's an old Native American saying that we are shaped by all our relations. And the Bantu term in South Africa is Ubuntu, which means I am because we are, since we are, therefore I am. This is really reality. That they're describing the way the world really works. And the research shows that the dysfunction of these interacting nested factors today is multi-systemic factors. It's really creating epidemics of distresses and traumas worldwide. So to address these multi-systemic factors, we've got to get out of our silos. We have to think differently, think systemically, and respond holistically. But we have seen in many places, and I'm sure all of you on the line have seen it too, that if we take this kind of path, the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis can activate deep-seated positive transformational changes. So what do we mean? We need to really build population-level capacity for transformation resilience. And this means that when suffering is caused by previously unseen external forces that have no endpoint, no resolution, or simple cure, the priority must be to help everyone develop the capacity to buffer themselves from and push back against those stressors and find constructive new sources of meaning, purpose, courage, and hope in life. And those external forces that have no endpoint, resolution, or simple cure, that's a description of the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. This is going to get worse. no matter what we do for the next number of decades. So we have to help everyone buffer themselves from and push back against these and find new sources of meaning, purpose, courage, and hope, because the way most of us look at the world, the views we have about ourselves and the world, many of which are going to be shattered as the climate emergency worsens. So we need to help people find new sources of meaning, purpose, courage, and hope. So what does this mean in a little more detail? It means help everyone strengthen their capacity for what we call presencing, or self-regulation and co-regulation. This is about calming the body, mind, emotions, and behaviors during traumatic stressors. It's actually helping people in simple, self-administrable, age and culturally appropriate ways activate their parasympathetic nervous system to calm the sympathetic nervous system, which is really what keeps people in a fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And just as importantly, to focus on purposing, which is really pre and post adversity-based growth. And that is, again, to use adversity as transformational catalysts to find new sources of meaning, purpose, courage, and hope in life. So those are the two really important focuses from our perspective, at least those are the terms we use: presencing and purposing. You can call those whatever you want in where you work with the populations you work with. Just understanding the core principles is really key. But the combination, when people develop these skills, presencing and purposing skills, and groups do, the combination can really rebuild faith in the future. And the potential for transformational resilience, the capacity for that, is also shaped by these interacting individual, family, social, economic, physical, built, and ecological conditions. We have to address all of them. We need to respond at the scale of the challenges that lie ahead. And this means we must think and work at the population level and address all of those interacting factors. And this really resonated and was reinforced by a comment by the noted clinical psychologist, Dr. George Albee, who said, "No epidemic has ever been resolved by paying attention to the treatment of the affected individual." This is a psychologist, not a physical health person. He wasn't talking about a viral disease or a pandemic of that kind. He was talking about mental health issues. And it's the same. We have to deal with the entire population. So this key point led our research, this long research project we engaged in, to determine that we've got to expand beyond individual mental health services to prioritize a public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience. Well, what does this mean? What is a mental health approach, a public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience? It takes a population level approach, just like any public health approach does, not one that merely focuses on individuals with symptoms of pathology or high-risk groups, but they are fully integrated into this population level approach using approaches called proportionate universalism and life course approaches. I don't have time to go into the details about that today, but you can look that up. But our mantra has got to be leave no one behind. And this is vital for the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. A public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience prioritizes preventing problems before they emerge, not merely reacting to or treating them after they appear. And it integrates group and community-minded healing methods into the prevention strategies. And I'll talk about that and how that happens in a few minutes. But we must always remember that prevention is the cure. That's really has to be our focus. And a public health approach to mental wellness and resilience accomplishes these goals by strengthening what's called protective factors, social supports, resilience skills, habits, local resources, and more that build and sustain healthy thinking and behaviors, not just fixing deficits or treating individuals with symptoms of pathology. So we've got to focus on enhancing strengths, assets, and resources. A public health approach to mental wellness and resilience The research shows that mental wellness and resilience can be enhanced. And the most effective way to do that is to establish the horizontal social infrastructure in communities. That means connections between people throughout the community that can be called a resilience coordinating network. That's our term for it. Many organizations call it something different: resilience task forces, resilience board of directors, and many don't even use the term resilience. Each is different, but it really is engaging people throughout the community in this work. And it engages a broad and diverse array of respected local grassroots leaders, faith and spirituality leaders, neighborhood leaders, civic, nonprofit, private and public sector leaders. They come together and jointly plan and implement strategies that strengthen as many of those existing protective factors as they can and form as many additional new ones as possible to enhance population level mental wellness and transformational resilience. Here's a sample resilience coordinating network. This is the ideal, but it's based on one in North Carolina, actually. It's pretty darn close to it. In the middle, and it's called, you can look at it as well-coordinated decentralization using a ring team or hub and spoke approach. So inside the inside circle, you'll see a list of folks around. So I'll start at the upper side. There's neighborhood leaders, there's private sector leaders going to the right, civic leaders, youth leaders, public sector, mental health and human services, NGO, nonprofit, faith leaders, et cetera. They are the steering committee or the board, whatever you might want to call it. And it's made up of people who represent or work with all of the different populations in the community. They don't start off that way. Usually they only have about a third or a half of the population, but over time, more people join. Inside, you see that the steering committee might elect a co-chairs and select an executive committee who make everyday decisions. But the group meets at least monthly. But outside of that, you see a bunch of what we call innovation teams. These are groups that work with specific sectors or populations and develop their own strategies to do that, but they keep coordinating their strategies with the broader group. So there's up in the upper right-hand corner, there's people that are working with neighborhood groups and creating strategies to build transformational resilience with the neighborhood groups. There's folks working with the private sector, and they're going down to the right, with youth groups, with educational programs, with the public sector folks, human services, the people working on the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, arts and cultures, and others. They develop their own strategies, getting trained in information that is generated by the steering committee, et cetera. Then they share their strategies with the whole group, and they get feedback on it to be able to improve it. So an education team might say, well, we've now got a resilience building strategy underway for public schools in our community. But then somebody said, well, 15% of the kids in our community are being homeschooled or going to private school. Have you thought about that? Oh, no, we haven't. Okay, we'll try to now develop a strategy to engage them. So you get that kind of feedback, very honest feedback, but people also can coordinate fundraising together, the different groups. Oh, we're going to go to this same funder. Well, maybe we need to clarify the difference between your two initiatives to make sure you can both get funding, or maybe we should combine the two and present one proposal. Different ways to do it. But the point is, this is well-coordinated decentralization using a ring team and hub and spoke approach to really build population level mental wellness resilience. So why do we need to build these ongoing resilience coordinating networks? There's one way to look at this, there's 6 common phases of disaster. Over on the left-hand side, there's the pre-disaster phase where we're getting warnings about it. Sometimes it's years or days, maybe it's just hours. An earthquake's going to happen, you might get a day or an hour. But the climate emergency we've had actually well over 100 years, when scientists first realized that more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would warm the atmosphere. But certainly in the last 30 years, we've gotten a warning that this is happening. But then the impacts come. We didn't really do much about the warning. So we're getting more impacts, and the impacts can, like if it's a disaster, a wildfire, an extreme storm, a hurricane, whatever it might be, an extreme heat event, and 20 to 40% of the people who are directly impacted can be traumatized, and also 10 to 20% of the first emergency responders and others who just know someone who's impacted or watch it from afar. Then as the impacts are occurring, the heroic phase starts. People who you never knew and never heard about step forward and put their life on the line often to help others. And towards the end and middle or end, and for after the disaster ends, the emergency ends, you go into what's called the community cohesion phase, often sometimes called the honeymoon phase, where people who don't know each other, might not even like each other, come together, they help each other find food, water, shelter, emotional support, and other kinds of activities. And that's what we hear about. They say, oh, and where there's disaster, people come together. So that's all we need. We'll just look forward to that. And that's true, it does exist, but usually just for a few days, maybe a month, if it's a really serious disaster. And then you hit the disillusionment phase. And this is when people have to then go back and put their own lives together. And so people are now on their own. And it can last for years or months or years, and generates. This is where most of the mental health and psychosocial problems appear, in the disillusionment phase. Some people remain dysregulated for many, many years, and others begin the process of recovery. But more new relentless stresses or new disasters, as the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis will create, can cause regression or prevent recovery altogether. And some people, if you don't have those stresses, some people will, quote unquote, bounce back to where they were. So why do we need to establish these resilience coordinating networks over the long term? Because the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is going to continue for decades. Most mental health and psychosocial problems surface months or longer after the extreme stresses and disasters occur in the community cohesion phase. And so we need to build the horizontal infrastructure that allows residents to sustain community cohesion for decades. And this is really going to be vital. And why do this at the neighborhood and community level? Because this is where most people spend most of their time and interact most directly with the social, physical, and built economic and ecological conditions that affect their physical health and their mental and psychological and social psychological conditions. So when we did our research, we kept asking people, what's really key? What do you find is most important to help strengthen and enhance and sustain mental wellness and resilience during adversities? And we found 5 core, really very foundational protective factors. There are others, but these are the 5 foundational protective factors that these community initiatives need to focus on. And by far the most important is to build social connections across cultural, economic, and geographic boundaries in the communities. One way to look at that is bonding connections between friends, families, and neighbors, bridging connections between more than one bonding network, friends, families, and neighbors in this part of the community get to connected and bridge with another one, and then linking social support networks, links between bonding and bridging, and organizations and people with economic power, with food and water resources to tap into during disasters, et cetera. Building social connections is vital to overcome the toxic social isolation and loneliness that is generating profound mental health problems everywhere today. And friends, families, and neighbors are far more important than first responders during the first 3 to 5 days, and often way longer, of many disasters. And social connections are especially important in times of extreme stress because they provide the emotional safety and practical support people need for health and resilience. And doing so helps some people find new sources of meaning and purpose in their lives by assisting others to develop these social connections. So it's a way to provide meaning and purpose by engaging others in creating good social connections. Another core protective factor, foundational protective factor we found was to ensure a just transition by actively engaging residents in creating zero-emission, climate-resilient, physical built, economic, and ecological conditions. As I said, most of the time residents are not engaged in this work. These are done by other organizations. But when community residents are engaged in creating a just transition, it really is a powerful thing. This involves creating locally owned and operated businesses that provide living wage jobs and income, or healthy and safe public spaces, equitable transportation, healthy food and forest and ecological systems, and providing food, water, and shelter for folks. Unsafe, unhealthy, and unjust local conditions create mental health and psychosocial issues. Poor, unsafe housing can be a real risk for mental health, as can ecological conditions, pollution, et cetera, bad transportation. But active engagement in these are pro-social activities really creates healthier and just local economic conditions that builds hope, that strengthens and enhances resilience and adaptability. The Neighborhood Resilience Project in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has really done some of the greatest work on this and engaging residents in this kind of activity. At the same time, integrating efforts to reduce this kind of work integrates efforts to reduce emissions and enhance physical resilience with efforts to build human resilience can lead residents to really create social and political change. They become activated. They see that they actually have the potential, the capacity to produce change. And just like with building social connections, doing this work can motivate some people to find new sources of meaning, purpose, and hope in their lives by helping other people engage in these activities. They become engaged in providing food, water, and shelter for people and help others do that, as an example. Just to reiterate again, there is no community resilience without human, social, psychological, emotional resilience. Projects to slash greenhouse gas emissions, regenerate local systems, and strengthen external physical resilience really needs to be fully integrated with initiatives that build population, mental wellness, and transformation resilience. And emergency response, disaster mental health, and other services will also be more effective when fully integrated into proactive community-led resilience initiatives, not just responding after a disaster occurs. A third foundational protective factor we identified in our research was to foster universal literacy about mental wellness and transformational resilience by helping everyone become trauma and resilience informed. This builds on health literacy. And it starts, you see this chart, by helping everyone understand how traumas and toxic stress can affect their mind, body, emotions, and behaviors, and how it can affect groups. And you see groups do all this crazy stuff, you understand they're traumatized. But also then learning these presencing, self-regulation, and purposing adversity-based growth skills. When people understand what's happening in basic, simple ways, how trauma and stress affect them, it really helps them understand what's going on within them and within other people. And this can normalize their struggles, reduce their fears of stigmatization, and eliminate their stigmatization of others when they see other people traumatized, while at the same time building the knowledge and skills needed to prevent and heal their own mental health and psychosocial problems and struggles, and motivating some to find meaning, purpose, and hope in their lives by helping people learn these kind of information and skills. The fourth foundational protective factor our research identified is to help residents regularly engage in specific practices that enhance mental wellness and transformational resilience. Having people laugh often. There's a group up in Victoria, a neighborhood resilience group in Victoria, BC, Canada, that created a way to have neighbors get together and run plays and skits for each other to make people laugh in the midst of dangerous smoke events and other disasters. But practicing forgiveness, keep learning. That's going to be critical as the climate emergency, ecosystem biodiversity crisis goes on. Caring for the body, simple joys, etc. Active engagement in these kind of activities releases the trauma from the nervous system, which helps prevent and heal traumas, while building social connections through pro-social activities. And it establishes activities that foster emotional states that provide residents with meaning during adversities, practicing forgiveness, being grateful, really provides a sense of meaning during adversity. And again, motivates some people in the community, some residents, to find meaning and purpose by helping others engage in these activities. And the fifth of the foundational protective factors we identified was to continually engage residents in ongoing, mostly peer-led, group and community-minded trauma healing events. Up at the top, you see healing circles and other group methods. There's many communities that do this kind of work. Healing circles are very important. Integrated community therapy developed in Brazil and now widespread use in Brazil and many other countries is one approach. The Community Resilience Project or model developed by the Trauma Resource Institute, one of our core partners. The Center for Mind-Body Medicine does this kind of work. And it's very, very effective. They train residents in how to lead these healing, group healing processes. But there's also somatic healing, there's expressive healings, mindfulness-based, spiritual healing, nature-based, and animal therapies, memorial events. And you'll see down in the lower right that mental health services will remain important, but they're not the dominant approach. Group healing events facilitated by peers normalizes struggles and helps eliminate the fears of being stigmatized. And they allow residents to hear how others view their struggles and approach healing in a non-judgmental way. You can do these group healing methods with 5 to 200 people, and I've seen it done with large groups. They provide this emotional safety net that helps people release their trauma, begin to heal, and remain resilient and adaptable, while again motivating some residents to find new meaning, purpose, and hope in their lives by being trained as a peer facilitator to help offer or facilitate some of these initiatives. All of these 5 core protective factors are interactive. Communities start with what makes sense, and then they add others when and if they can. They're all connected. I just went through them linearly, but they're all connected, and you can start at a different community, start at a different place based on their demographics, the issues in their community, et cetera. But they're best done by place-based community-led initiatives. What do I mean by that? A community-based initiatives is led by an NGO, a nonprofit, or a community-based organization, a CBO, or a professional organization or government agency. They have the ultimate decision-making authority when they're leading this. They get the funding, for example. They have to meet what they told their funders they were going to do. They're decision makers. They go out and they engage community members often, but the community members don't really feel like it's their project. So if the funding ends or the organization decides not to do it anymore, the initiative ends. It just because the local residents have not bought into it. They don't own it. Community-led is different. It's actually led by networks of residents and organizations that together have ultimate decision-making authority. They might nominate an NGO, a nonprofit, to be their fiscal sponsor and go get funding, but the NGO is not the final decision-making authority. Both community-based and community-led are important. Sometimes the only way you get community-led initiatives underway is for a nonprofit to get some funding and start it, but they have to make sure they turn it into a community-led initiatives. Community-led networks can reconceptualize what preventing and healing means beyond the individualized approach and build the social relationships that address both practical needs, food, water, shelter, etc., and deeper human needs for connections and feeling respected and feeling honored, etc. There are a number of examples of these resilience coordinating networks in North America. One of the best is the North Carolina Smart Start Healthy and Resilience Community Initiative. It now has 50 of these county or community-led initiatives underway, some in development, some stronger. They focus on 4 ACEs: adverse childhood experiences, adverse community experiences, adverse climate experiences, and atrocious cultural experiences. And their goals there are to help everyone understand what's going on, develop a unifying framework and strategies, and co-create all this together. But Virginia's Trauma-Informed Community Networks has 32 of these networks building resilience and preventing and mitigating the impacts of trauma in their communities. Peace for Tarpon in Tarpon Springs, Florida, it is a wonderful project. It was the first trauma-informed community in the US, and it's now spurred all sorts of other Peace 4 initiatives in the Southeast. The Community Resilience Initiative in Walla Walla, Washington is one of the leaders in this work. There's over 200 that were associated with the MARC program, Mobilizing Action for Resilient Communities. They're mostly focused on adverse childhood experiences, and it was developed by the Health Federation of Philadelphia. I think it's still on their website, the report about it. But there's also many international programs going on around the world, beyond the US. And they're mental health and psychosocial support groups, as they call them. Most are focused on humanitarian issues, child protection, emergency settings. But the definition of it by the Interagency Standing Committee is a community-based MHPSS approach, puts individuals, communities, and social systems at the center of the intervention in all phases of the responses. And you can see from their chart how that did. And you can get, I put the website there, you can get more information about this. Only a few of these initiatives describe their work as a public health approach. More and more do, but they all, each is unique. There is no one-size-fits-all approach, each one based on what's happening in their community. None address all of the 5 protective factors yet, and only a few are focused on their entire population. They're growing beyond, towards that. And only a few are explicitly focused on the climate emergency, but they all tend to use common principles and methods and have the same kind of goals. They show how community is medicine. And if those not focused on the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis expand to address it, and thousands of new community initiatives are launched worldwide, we can build universal capacity for transformational resilience for the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, and we'll deal with a lot of other issues ourselves. So with this as background, I want to now talk about the ITRC's contribution to the UN High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience program. Working with trauma in the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice, CTIP, Trauma-Informed Oregon, and many other co-sponsors in the US, and with many networks and partners worldwide that we're already involved with, we're going to try to help communities organize, grow, and commission local context-specific resilience coordinating networks globally. And that's important. Each is going to be different. It's going to be resilience coordinating networks going to be framed around the local context, the culture, the demographics, the economics, et cetera. So we're going to begin the initiative. We sort of already begun it, but we're really going to formally begin it in the fall of this year. And we're going to do that through 3 ways. Community groups, a couple of people in a community will contact us or one of our partners and say, we are interested in forming a resilience coordinating network. So we will give them information, technical assistance, phone, email assistance, written information, and involve them in a community of practice with other folks that we determine are prospective resilience coordinating networks. So they'll get that designation, and then when they do that, they'll start to get information from us, the assistance, and they'll begin to be able to communicate with others who are trying to do the same kind of work, learning what they're doing, how they're doing it, et cetera. When a prospective network has developed a broad and diverse steering committee or board of directors, whatever they want to call it, again, it's got to represent most of the populations and sectors in the community, and that those folks are committed to developing a multi-systemic strategy to build population-level mental wellness and transformational resilience, we will then move them into a category called emerging transformational resilience coordinating network. And what this means is, this is when they begin to develop that multi-systemic strategy that uses a public health approach to build population-level mental wellness and resilience. We will provide them information about how to do that, technical assistance for how to do that, engage them in a community practice so they can talk with others in their country, in their region, and even internationally who are developing these strategies to problem solve together, to share examples of what they're doing, just to really understand what others are doing and really build this movement. And at the same time, we're really going to help them improve or create conflict resolution strategies so that their steering committee works out problems without undermining their efforts, and to talk about fundraising strategies and other things to help them really come together. When they have a multi-systemic, public health focused strategy to build population level mental wellness resilience finalized or close to finalized, we're going to move them into a commissioned status as a transformation resilience coordinating network, a commissioned network. And what this means is we're going to give them a certificate and a logo that they can use on their websites and in documents that'll help them go get fundraising, work for fundraising, talk to other community members, and we will provide them with more information about how to strengthen and expand their network. It really engage commission networks and communities of practice with others around the world. So people are talking to each other, sharing examples, problem solving together in other ways, really figuring out how to make these work. There's going to be a lot of innovation that's going to be required. And there's no one size fits all approach. So the more people hear different options, the better. And if you would like to know more about this, or if you have a couple of friends or families or people in your community that you would like to work with to organize a new resilience coordinating network and become a prospective transformational resilience coordinating network, or if you're involved in an existing coalition that might be working on adverse childhood experiences or humanitarian issues, but you want to expand to develop a strategy to prevent and heal mental wellness and mental health issues for the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, we invite you to contact us and let us know that you're interested. So I just want to summarize that the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is a civilization-altering event that's going to stress or traumatize everyone. And the solutions demand transformational changes in many, many aspects of society. One critical change is going to be to expand how we prevent and heal mental health and psychosocial struggles to embrace a public health approach in communities. And this requires establishing the horizontal social infrastructure that engages all residents in activities that build and sustain mental wellness resilience from the bottom up, as the residents also engage in transforming their community and addressing those social, economic, physical, built, and ecological factors that'll also create the pressure for change even higher up. This really, really is going to be important. The impacts of the climate emergency, we can talk about the global impacts, but they're felt at the local level. And that's why we really need to engage communities. So our Race to Resilience initiative seeks to help communities worldwide develop and organize and strengthen and grow their resilience coordinating networks and build population level transformational resilience. And if we do that, based on what we've seen in the initiatives that we already see going, we can create some very, very, very important positive changes. So we invite you to join us. You can contact TR at trig-cli.org. At the same time, when we launch the program in September or this fall, we will send you all an email saying, we're now starting the program. Please let us know if you're interested. We'll provide more information about what an emerging versus a prospective versus a commissioned resilience coordinating network looks like, what you'll need to provide us, what we can provide you, and you can just make those decisions as to really if you want to participate. But we really invite you to join us. We hope you will engage in this and or just build your own resilience coordinating networks in your community. We really hope you will participate in this work. So with that, I want to thank you for attending today's presentation and hope we interact with you quite a bit as time goes on. So with that, I'll close the presentation. Thank you all for joining us. We don't have time, by the way, or the ability with so many people on the line to have question and answer. So, but if you have questions, please send them to tr@trig-cli.org. Thank you all. We appreciate you being here, and we wish you all the best as the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis plays out. Take care.